Okay, can I finish up with chapter 9 real quick, and then we'll go into chapter 10. So we left out talking about the growth of the cities, and a lot of that growth came from the immigration that was going to start after the War of 1812. There's a lot of land, there's a lot of need for laborers, and so immigration is going to increase quite a bit during this time period. Greatest influx was 1845 to 1854. About 15% of the total population was immigrant. By 1860, 1 out of 8 were foreign-born, and largest groups were Irish, Germans, and the British. For Irish, there was a very long depression, a lot of very densely populated areas. Average death was 19 in Ireland. There's a potato famine, and so a lot of them are going to come to America looking for better life, although many of them die on the way over from just poor quality of life to begin with, and then going on a very hard journey was very hard on them personally. They eventually are going to settle in the cities. They're very poor. They can't migrate out of the cities, and so there's a lot of overcrowding, horrible conditions that come out of that. Anti-Irish sentiments starting because of it too. There's a lot of prejudice against them, especially because they're Catholic. They're characterized as being ignorant. A lot of companies and places wouldn't hire Irish just because they were Irish. A lot of the Irish will actually go towards the Democrat Party with Jackson and vote towards the Democrat Party. They admire him, being from a Scots-Irish background, from immigrant parents himself. They like the fact that he's for the common man, and they hate the aristocracy. And become the first minority group to exhibit very large political influence in some of the city areas. Germans were, for the most part, more educated, cultured. Many of them coming over being doctors, lawyers, engineers, many of them being farmers, and a lot of them go to those rural areas rather than the cities. They tend to be more Protestants, Lutherans specifically. They're very prosperous compared to many others. Some examples your book gave were people like Ferdinand Schumacher, who was part of the Quaker Oats Company, Heinrich Steinweg, who becomes Steinway for pianos, and Levi Strauss, who made jeans. British, Scandinavians, Chinese also immigrating during the time. Norwegians and Swedes more towards like Wisconsin and Minnesota. Very similar climate to what they were used to. Chinese immigrants go more towards California. Nativism is the big response to immigration, and this is a good term to know. If you don't know it, write it down. Nativism is resenting foreign influence, being against foreign influence. They were afraid of Catholics coming in and basically taking over. Very anti-Catholic. Lyman Beecher, one of the first ones, or major ones for the anti-Catholic sermons. Some armed clashes actually between Protestants and Catholics at this point. Nativist groups try to kind of prove their patriotism by hating foreigners. They organize groups. They one of the secret fraternal orders that was organized was the Order of the Star-Spangled Banner. Becomes a very large third party in politics, become known as the Know-Nothings, and they want to get rid of all immigrant influence. They pledge never to vote for any foreign-born or Catholic candidate and try to get more people on board for that sentiment. Organized labor is a big part. Anytime you have an increase in industry, factories, organized labor, any of that. Workers are organized by trade in a lot of these trade unions. A lot of societies promoting the interests of the members, trying to get better hours, better conditions, getting more recognition as being a legitimate fighting force for those people, trying to ensure quality control, provide good treatment for everybody. Controversy was used over the idea of putting slaves in factories versus skilled laborers or semi-skilled laborers. So there's a bit of a contention between groups in the North and groups in the South. So in the early unions, like in the court case Commonwealth versus Hunt, the court ruled that forming a trade union was not illegal, nor was it illegal to demand employers hire only from those union, and they had the right to strike. So basically getting more legal backing that the groups could exist, they could argue, they could fight for what workers wanted, and were a legal organization because of that. Labor politics starting to remove more property qualifications, and more people are voting during this time period. Everything's becoming more democratic, looking more towards looking out for the little guys, not just the big politicians and the economic and political elite. For professionalism, there's a lot of social changes, and that came with new professions, more high-status jobs. Professionals had to have specialized knowledge, but to go along with this age of democracy that we were going through, they wanted to make these jobs more democratic, to make them less elite. So basically, you could be part of some of these professions without having a degree or a certification. You could be a doctor without a medical degree. You could practice law without a law degree. Teaching was one of the fastest growing occupations, mostly young men being hired. And it was kind of like a stepping stone onto other things like being a lawyer or other careers. Law was very popular. Many attorneys lacked formal education, were self-taught. Several famous self-taught lawyers throughout the next few decades. Physicians, many of them lack formal education. Some of them just were self-taught or would assist another doctor, and that was their training. Engineering became a very large occupation as well. Women's work was confined to what was called the cult of domesticity. This is another term that if you don't have it written down somewhere, write this one down. This is a big old fat College Board word to know. And the cult of domesticity is basically known as the same thing as what we used to call Republican motherhood. Primary domestic work, best suited for marriage and having kids and raising those kids. That is women's main career to strive for, is wife and mother. And that is it for chapter 9.